I want to give a big shout out to my buddy Nels. Nels, I don't know if you're listening to this. Maybe your mom's listening to this. Who really knows? But Nels is a buddy of mine from BCIT. And yesterday we had a quick conversation after the Montreal Canadiens made the Patrik Laine trade. And yeah, we're going to be milking the hell out of this topic over the next few days here, so buckle up. We still have the Patrik Laine interview to go over as well. That is not going to be talked about in this video. Instead, what I wanted to do was go over Kent Hughes, Montreal Canadiens GM, and just the magnitude of how impressive this summer has been for the man. Because when it comes to Kent Hughes and my buddy Nels, the conversation we had, I wanted to go out there and just kind of insinuate an idea. Because one of the things my friend said to me was, hey, it is absolutely great to have a Montreal Canadiens GM who actually knows how to make things interesting. Today, or yesterday when we had this conversation, this Patty Laine trade just adds on to the crazy offseason that the Montreal Canadiens have had. Sure, they didn't make any huge acquisitions in a trade or a free agency beforehand, but they made some good splashes at the draft. There were a lot of good things coming out of the Canadiens, and now this Patty Laine trade, my friend told me, he was like, hey, 3 summers ago, Marc Bergevin had me excited for a Mike Hoffman signing. And now, in 2024, it's the Patrik Laine trade special, baby. And I wanted to go out there and just kind of illuminate how crazy everything has been. You know, I always said, when Marc Bergevin was the Montreal Canadiens GM, that I loved and appreciated the continuous action that he would go out there and provide the team. He would make trades, he would make signings, he was not afraid to do this stuff in bulk because it gave us all video material to go out there and use for weeks on end. We could continuously make videos about everything the Canadiens were doing because Marc Bergevin was doing a lot. It's just the magnitude as to what Bergevin was doing. How many huge, absolutely blockbuster trades did he pull off with the Montreal Canadiens? I mean, Subban for Weber was a pretty big one, but then you take a look at some of the others. I mean, I don't know, Nick Suzuki, Max Pacioretty, pretty big trade, but that was a long time ago. Then you have yourselves the, I guess you could say, Anderson for Domi trade. Then you have, like, Philippe Deneau for whatever it was they sent over to Chicago in that trade. Dale Weiss? I mean, look, no disrespect to Marc Bergevin, no disrespect to Dale Weiss, but the amount of trades that Marc Bergevin went out there and made that I think actually hyped up the fan base in the way the Patty Laine trade was made yesterday, I honestly don't even think it's comparable. Like what, you want to talk about the Thomas Vanek from New York Islanders trade back in the day? Probably not. The Montreal Canadiens and Kent Hughes have been in such a different direction that it's so easy to clearly identify what exactly it is this team is trying to do. Get younger, get guys who are good, get guys who are still capable of being a part of this organization and going further, and bolster up the prospect pool in the process. The Montreal Canadiens gained a second-round pick to take on Patrik Laine and his salary. They traded away Jordan Harris to do it, yes, but if you think about it, Jordan Harris getting traded for a second is kind of already appropriate anyway. Patrik Laine getting added onto the deal, while sure, it's an asset that Columbus was looking to get rid of, sure, it's an asset that's costing $8.7 million a year, but the Canadiens, as we've been saying this entire time, they have cap room. They had the opportunity to use this kind of a player because they've got Carey Price's contract on the LTIR, and before the Laine trade, they were already still multiple millions of dollars below the salary cap ceiling. So they had all the opportunities to make this work. They added a really great piece to their top 6. We can go over all the things that Patrik Laine will be able to do, but when you think about Kent Hughes and the summer he has had, not only was it just trade for Patrik Laine, you think about some of the other additions that were made too. And in particular, I think the easiest one to point your finger at is the 5th overall pick, Ivan Demidov, in the 2024 NHL Entry Draft. Kent Hughes has put himself in a spot where I think maybe like 3 months ago, Canadiens fans would have had an incredibly different idea of what this team really was. I mean, look. Now, Montreal Canadiens fans, upon looking at the Laine trade, they're taking a look at the size of the top 6. Never mind Cole Caulfield, he's a little bit smaller, but Slafkovsky, big guy. Laine, big guy. Doc, big guy. Even some of the guys that aren't really top 6 caliber players, Josh Anderson, big guy. This is the entire conversation that we had brought up with Cayden Lindstrom time and time again, whenever we would talk about the Canadiens and potentially the idea of drafting him instead of Demidov at the 5th overall spot. But if you think about Patrik Laine, you think about Kirby Dach, you think about the comeback story that could be possible for both of these top 3 picks, and you start to get really excited for what the future holds in 2024-2025. If these guys stay healthy, if these guys play to the best of their abilities, if Caulfield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky go out there and do what is expected of them, if all these things come together, and you have Laine Hudson taking the step, you have Kaiden Guhle taking a big step, maybe you get a few extra performances out of a guy like Mailloux or a Barron or whatever to round out the bottom of your right-handed decor. If all of these things work, I don't want to dismiss the idea of the Canadiens becoming a playoff team, maybe? Like, at the very least, challenging for a wildcard spot? That is, of course, if everything works out, right? If Laine gets 35 goals, if he gets 40 assists, if you have Kirby Dach going out there with a 55-point season, if Caulfield gets 40 goals, if Suzuki gets 80 points, if Slafkovsky gets 80 points, and then Ivan Demidov comes out of the shadows, finishes his SKA St. Petersburg season, and then joins the Canadiens right before the end of the regular season in the NHL. If everything comes together in that way, which it's not, like, very easy to say it's going to happen. Like, you could say, yeah, it's unrealistic to happen. But if it does happen, it's not impossible that the Canadiens can actually be way more competitive than we think they could be. Now, is it all the more likely that they end up finishing somewhere in the bottom half of the league and they maybe get the 9th or the 10th overall pick in next year's entry draft? I'd say that's probably the most likely scenario. It's even possible for the Canadiens to totally crap the bed and get injured a bunch like they have been over the past few years and then drop down to number 5 in the draft or something like that. But it is possible that this team in 24-25 is so much better results-wise than anybody could have imagined, let's say 3 months ago. That's not even including the Ivan Demidov thing into the entire equation. That's an entirely separate issue. So for Kent Hughes, the way he has built this team, 2 absolutely game-breaking, game-changing additions. I wanted to go out there and give the man his props. Give that man his money. Because he just went out there and won big time, baby. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to how Kent Hughes has built and shaped this team, the conversation with my buddy, and how this kind of contrasts to Marc Bergevin and what we had seen out of him. Sure, Bergevin made multiple trades, and I remember this because, you know, we were making videos about all of them. It was great content, but the magnitude of these. There wasn't a Kirby Dach trade for Montreal. There wasn't a Newhook trade. There wasn't a Barron trade. There wasn't a consistent theme throughout the trades. Hey, we're getting younger guys. We are retooling, rebuilding on the fly. We got Patrik Laine of all people. Sure, you could debate circumstantially different teams, different progressions with these teams and their expectations, so maybe it wasn't all too fair to compare these two directly, but I'm doing it anyway. So, if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How would you grade Kent Hughes' offseason? Never mind, like, the contract re-signings that were done, too. I mean, Arber Xhekaj, Justin Barron, a bunch of guys getting money for the Canadiens. That's totally fine, but it's all expected. We all recognize that these were going to happen. Even the bigger ones, like Kaiden Guhle, Slafkovsky, like, okay, yeah, like, not surprising. They signed their contracts. Woohoo. But then you think about the guys that actually entered the organization. Ivan Demidov, Michael Hage, Patrik Laine. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Kent Hughes. I hope you enjoyed this video. Next video on the channel is going to be about the Patty Laine interview, and bye.